My name is Sadie Rich, and here's my artist presentation on Deborah Butterfield. First off, I just want to give a little intro to Deborah Butterfield. One of my citations is a YouTube video of her just going through the timeline of her life and her career, and she gives a lot of really cool information about her background and what started her on this path. So first and foremost, Deborah Butterfield works with equine subjects made from a variety of materials, but most commonly driftwood, bronze, and scrap metal. She constructs her sculptures without sketches or maquettes and creates three-dimensional works that seem to have emotion and feeling. Butterfield uses the form of a horse as a metaphor for herself. In this citation, she's presenting a timeline of her works, and she mentions that she was born on the day of the Kentucky Derby. And she also mentions that throughout her life, she has felt a connection to horses. She had horses growing up, and she has worked on stables and farms that had horses, and she's just always felt a connection to them. And she feels that her works are a self-portrait in a way of herself. She studied at the University of California, Davis, and she received her MFA there. Her early works were ceramics and vases, and she moved on towards working with saddles and creating works of art out of that. And this is the beginning of her finding her passion with the form of horses. In that same citation, she goes on to show some of her early works and some of the very first works that she made based around the form of a horse. This particular portrait of a horse is of her own horse named Burlap. She created this sculpture, and to use the measurements, she didn't want to use a tape measurement, so instead she measured her horse against herself. So saying that this part of the body was as long as her forearm, that the head to the nose was as long as her knee to her ankle and such. And I found this quite interesting because, as I mentioned before, she sees these forms of horses as herself in a way, and I find it interesting that she used herself as a reference against her own horse, and it kind of just adds that self-reflection on another level that I find really interesting. My next citation is about the work Monaikana. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but it is a work later in her life and in her career, and you can see that even now she is still creating works based around the horse figure. This has become her sole subject. This work was created in 2001. Um, it was created at her studio in Hawaii, and she used the Hawaiian wood fragments that she found to create the original maquette. Um, the name of the sculpture is the Hawaiian word for Montana, which is her current state of residence. I find this piece interesting to see how she's expressing the two places she calls home in this single piece. The use of the Hawaiian wood and the Hawaiian language for the title reflect the time and experience at her studio there, but the translation of the sculpture's name reflects her home state of Montana and nods to her roots and her experiences there. My next citation focuses on this portrait of her husband, John Buck. Most of Butterfield's sculptures are an extension of herself, and one could make an argument that this one is as well. Spouses are often seen as a part of each other or their other half, and it only seems right that Butterfield would consider her partner in life in the same way as she considers herself. The sculpture differs from a lot of her other ones because instead of using driftwood and bronze, she's using scrap metal that she has found to create this sculpture. I find the meaning behind this one really interesting as it strays a little bit from herself, which she has done a lot of works on, and it starts to reach out more towards her family. And we can see through this and other sculptures about how she continues reaching out and creating works that aren't just about herself, but about the world around her and the experience that we all have. So that leads me into this next one, which is called The Three Sorrows. Butterfield collected remnants from the devastating 2011 earthquake in Japan. The earthquake that triggered a tsunami that led to a nuclear disaster in Fukushima. The piece discusses the tragedy and loss that came from the 2011 earthquake in Japan. Butterfield uses her works to convey genuine feelings of humanity and existence here on Earth. The scraps of trash strewn around the horse that are used to create the horse helps to emphasize the experience of the earthquake and the ruin that was left in its wake. The somber pose of the horse reflects the heartache and the emotion of the people that were affected by it. I really like this piece. as it goes just beyond Deborah Butterfield as a subject herself, and it starts to reach more towards universal feelings and universal emotions and experiences. And I can remember when this earthquake happened and just seeing the ruin that was left and the heartache and the experiences that those people in Japan felt and lived through. And I find it really moving to see this piece created in her like interpretation of that. My last citation is this piece of work called Portal, and this was created from driftwood collected along the Gallatin River in Montana and the Shoshone River in Wyoming, which is in the area where Butterfield lives. I'm going to use this piece to kind of talk about the reasons that I chose Deborah and why I really like her works. The reason I found Butterfield's work of art is the emotion that she's able to invoke with such a simple form. All of her pieces exude such feelings of humanity and emotion. I create most of my art around the human form, so it's interesting to me that someone else is able to create something so human without a subject, or with a subject that is not human, that it's a horse, it's an animal. I love the human figure, and I love how that can convey emotion and human experience that we all feel every day. And I thought it was really interesting how Deborah Butterfield can create those same emotions and feelings in her audience, but with a different subject and with a subject that at first thought isn't really human. But once you kind of get thinking about it, you start to see that like animals are just like us, and there's so much of the world that we experience as humans that are tied together and intertwined. Just some of my final thoughts. Deborah Butterfield, she has been working in her career and creating her art for over 50 years, and I find it really admirable and inspirational. You can see through her timeline and through the like dedication and talent and skill that she has and how she has like honed her craft to become what it is today. And not only has she like sold pieces to like noteworthy people, but she's also been featured in lots of museums and galleries. And I find it really inspirational to see how hard she has worked and what she's able to achieve through that.